Okay, so we are here with author Angela Hunt. We are here for meet and greet, and she has written the book Esther. It's a novel that we have chosen for the Bookish Saints Book Club. And we just would like to ask Angela to just introduce herself and give us a little backstory to who she is and what she does. So if you want to go ahead.
Okay. I'm Angela Hunt. Most people call me Angie, except for salesmen and people who don't know me. And I've been writing since 1983, and I became a writer because I wanted a job that I could do at home and stay home with my kids. We adopted our kids, and I felt like I worked so hard to get them that I didn't want to get a baby and then go straight back to work. So we adopted our kids from South Korea, and they're grown now, so they're out of the house, but now I have grandchildren. But anyway, I've written, I think, 165 books, but they're not all novels because a lot of them are children's books, which are shorter. A lot of them are how to write books. The older I get, the more responsible I feel about sharing what I've learned about writing with the up and coming writers, because I know I won't be here forever. And it took me a long time to learn some things. So I try to pass that on as I can. And I I've been writing for the last several years. I've been writing biblical fiction, although I hate that term because if it's biblical, it shouldn't really be fictional, should it? But I like to call it historical fiction about biblical people, but that's not very pithy. So most people call it biblical fiction, and I guess I'll live with that. But Esther, I wrote some time ago. Of course, I've always loved the story of Esther. I mean, who doesn't? And this girl wanted to do a movie about Esther. And so she actually hired me to write a novel that she could use to write a screenplay. And she has never made the movie, but I wrote the book. And then she didn't have any use for it as a book. So then I sold it to my publisher, and it came out. And I, when I write a historical novel of no matter what kind it is, I do as much research as possible so I can get things as accurate as possible. And so for this book on Esther, I not only used the Bible, that was just my starting place, but I read tons of books on ancient Persia, on the king, Xerxes, read a lot about him. And, you know, my whole life, I'd been told some things about Esther that after I did some research, I realized were not accurate. Like I was told that the king had this big beauty pageant to find the most beautiful girl in the kingdom, and that would be his queen. Well, that's what we tell children. That is not at all what it was. These beautiful girls were ripped from their homes and placed in the king's harem. And he had hundreds of concubines and dozens of wives. And so they were literally giving up their lives and their futures and their families to go be a king's woman. And it was not glamorous or wonderful. And also about Vashti in the Bible, who has another name. She had a Persian name. I forget what it is in the book. It'll come to me in a minute. Do you remember what?
No, I don't.
Okay, a Trensis, maybe a Trensis. And maybe I used Vashti in the book. I don't remember.
I was
But
going to say, I think it's Vashti in the book.
okay, I used Vashti because the Bible uses Vashti.
Mm-hmm.
But King Xerxes actually, she had another name in all of the Persian historical books, and it was a Trensis. But when she was banished, she did not like leave. She just wasn't the king's wife anymore. And so she was still in the palace. And I actually was delighted when I discovered that because she had to resent Esther, and she was mother to the heirs, two of them. And so I thought, oh, how lovely to add, fiction writers, we like a lot of tension and friction. So I loved finding out that she was still there. And that episode where she had that woman brought and then mutilated her,
Yes.
that
Yes.
really happened. I didn't, I'm
That
not sure.
really happened?
Yeah,
I was going to ask you about that because so I have a couple of questions, but one of my questions was going to be about Vashti, and because obviously when we read the Bible, it really only gives like a small little account of her
sure.
in the book of Esther, where it just says that she was basically, she said no to the king, she disobeyed, and then she was banished. But I was going to ask you because I read that and I was like, like, oh my gosh, that sounds horrible. And I was
Yeah,
going to ask you, why did you make the character so I don't want to say gruesome, um, I guess
nasty.
hateful towards Esther, but I didn't know
Yeah,
that that was actually a true something
yeah,
that really did happen. So that's really
yeah.
interesting.
She was apparently, if we can judge from her actions, she was
Mhm.
apparently very jealous, very resentful. And see, the Bible tells us this, but most of us don't think about it. There was a period of like 7 years between the time that Vashti was dismissed and before they came upon this idea of let's go bring in beautiful virgins.
Mhm.
So during that 7 year period, the king went to battle with Greece and was defeated, which really knocked him for a mental loop because he was the head of the Persian Empire. He was like king of the world. And then when he got his rear end kicked by the Greeks, it really knocked him for a loop. And so he had this young girlfriend, and Vashti, who was still around, wanted to hurt this girl because she was jealous. So she did that scene that was to her mother, to that girl's mother. And of course, the lady, they took her home and she died from her injuries. She probably bled to death. But yeah, she was a piece of work, not good. So I thought, yeah, I've got this horrible woman in the same palace with Esther, so why not use her? But I do. I try to usually if there's something really weird in one of my books, it really happened because I do not sit around thinking of weird things to put in there. So yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
So my other question is, because obviously you said that you have done your research because you want to write a book and make it as accurate as possible. So how long did it take for you to actually write the book of Esther? Because you did have to do some research or, look up some background history.
I usually do my research in just a couple of weeks.
Okay.
I I read for big picture things like who was the king, what was the kind of empire, how was it set up, that sort of thing. And then I start writing. And then once I start writing, I realize more things I need to know, like they sat down to eat, what would they have eaten? And I'll put that in brackets. And then later, I'll go back and look for all those places where I've put brackets. And then I research those little bitty details to get them right. So
Okay.
first it's just big picture stuff, and then I get down to because I could never read everything there is to read, on Persia. So big picture, and then later I go back and get the little details and that kind of thing.
And then for that story of Vashti, if someone wanted to, I guess, look up the book that you maybe got your information from, what do you know, what book or what source that you got it from that someone would be able to look it up?
Well, I always list all my references in the back of the book. I'm,
Okay.
I'm sure I did in that one as well, just in case. Well, I do it for two reasons. One, because I've heard people say, oh, she didn't do her research. And I do. So I started listing just all my references. And secondly, in case anybody wants to learn more, then they can look there. But if you do go looking for that story, make sure you look for her Persian name, which was Atrensis, Atrensis, I think, wife to Xerxes, Xerxes. So that's how you would find her, and you'd find that story. And it was probably, I think I toned it down just because my readers don't want to get too grossed out. So it was probably much worse than how I depicted it. Although
Yeah.
I remember it was pretty gruesome.
It was pretty gruesome when I read it, and I actually one of the ladies that is in the book club, she read it too. We were reading it like at the same time because I kind of did like the timeline just for everyone. Like I did read two chapters or, these dates. and she read it too, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, she's like really gruesome, you know?" So, but I didn't know that that was actually like a part of who
Yeah,
she is or her character, because like I said, in the Bible, we only get like this much of who
yeah,
she is. So that's
yeah.
really interesting.
See, the Bible leaves out huge chunks of things. Like that's why you would think that Vashti got dismissed and the next day they went looking
Hmm.
for a king, a new queen. But it wasn't that way at all. There were years in between there that the king probably had a mental breakdown. I pictured him as kind of bipolar, kind of because he was very moody and he seemed to have these mood swings. And when he came back from Greece, I know he was in a black mood. And that's probably why his counselors at that point said, let's find young virgins and bring them to, let's get you some new women. And so there were all kinds of things at play in the story that the Bible doesn't even touch on.
Wow, that's very interesting. Let me see what other questions I have. Who was your favorite character to write about, I guess, in this book? Because I mean, obviously, we know the book is about Esther, but who was your favorite character to, I guess, learn more about or to write about?
Well, probably Esther. And um, I've had some resistance, well, bad reviews from people who say, oh, she painted her as a spoiled girl. And I've always thought Esther was like perfect. Well, first of all, nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
And and a character, a good protagonist or main character in a story has to grow and change and mature. So Esther didn't start out, I mean, as a teenage girl, I'm sure she was like a teenage girl. And so that's why I did. I painted her as this kind of young and spoiled teenage girl who is kind of infatuated with the whole palace thing, like a lot of girls are, until she got in it. And then she realized, oh my goodness, this being in the harem isn't all it's cracked up to be. And Harbona, the king's steward or chamberlain, maybe a
His
little bit.
eunuch, yeah,
Yeah,
the eunuch, yeah.
yeah, he was a eunuch. And I needed to have two characters because I needed to write scenes that happened in the king's life when Esther was nowhere around. So I needed another character who could tell what was happening in those scenes. So that's why I created, well, I didn't create him. He's real. I mean, he's in the Bible, Harbona. And I just started thinking about these poor eunuchs, these young boys that were captured in war and brought to Persia and castrated. And only then were they allowed to work in the palace around the king's women. So I guess they figured that was the only way they could trust them around the king's women. But these poor men, I mean, what happened to them? They had no choice in the matter. So I really felt sorry for them.
Is there a character that maybe you wish you would have? Because I know you did it from two different perspectives, so from Esther and Harbona's perspective, but like, is there anyone else that maybe you wish you, sorry, my dog's in the background. Is there anyone else that maybe you wish you would have, I guess, maybe added, like, or that you would maybe want to do like a spin-off with, like Mordecai, for example? Like, would you want to use a different character?
No, I've discovered that if I put too many point of view characters in the book, the reader feels their loyalties being divided. And so I try to have only two characters if I can get away with just two point of view characters. And that way the reader is right bonded to those two characters. And if I have more than that, then the reader, I've just discovered the reader character bond is not as strong if you put too many characters in your book.
Oh, okay, that's a good point. Let's see. Who is the most challenging character to write about in the book?
Oh, the king for sure. Um, because I kept thinking, one thing I learned a long time ago is that people, even when they do bad things, they're honestly convinced that they're doing the right thing. I mean, people who steal cars think that rich people who leave their keys in their cars deserve to have their cars stolen. They talk
Mhm.
themselves into that. And so I realized that even when he was doing bad things, um, he still thought it was right. And Haman, oh, Haman was truly horrible, but he justified it because he was an Amalekite and the Israelites had almost completely wiped out the Amalekites when they entered the promised land. And they were supposed to wipe out all the Amalekites, but they didn't. And they got Haman as a result. So yeah, but Haman was perfectly, he thought he was absolutely justified in doing what he was doing. But
Yeah.
he was awful.
Um, I know you said that you started writing books, when did you say 1980?
83, but for 5 years I just wrote magazine articles and catalog copy and small things because my kids were babies then and I was only writing in the afternoons while they took naps and stuff like that.
So what made you I guess choose to write Christian books? Because I know you said that you started doing also children's books. Were they Christian
Right.
books as well?
Some are, some aren't.
Okay.
I don't, I feel like I'm a writer who's a Christian, not
Okay.
not somebody who only writes Christian books. So I write books for everybody. Some of my books are secular, but I'm very much aware that I carry the reputation of Christ with me everywhere I go. And so I try never to write anything that will reflect badly on him. And even some of my secular books are actually parables. They have a spiritual meaning if you just kind of peel the layers away and see it. So, but I feel like, Jesus prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane. He prayed, Lord, Father, don't take them out of the world, but
Hmm.
protect them from the evil one. And so I feel like as a writer, I can and will write for anybody, um, as long as they're willing to listen or read, I should say.
Yes. And I know you said that you originally wrote the book Esther for someone that was going to make a movie out of it.
Right.
Would you at this point ever pursue to have it made into a motion picture?
Well, see, it doesn't quite work like that because to have a book made into a motion picture, you have to have a few $1 million laying
Yeah.
around.
And who
And
has that?
yeah, I mean, one of my books was made into a Hallmark movie,
Oh,
and
interesting.
but I did nothing to do it. I mean, people always said, "How'd you get your book made into the movie?" And I didn't do anything. Somebody just read it. They gave it to a movie guy, and it took him like 5 years to raise the money. They wanted to have a theatrical film made of it. And when they couldn't get the money for that, they sold it to a company who sold it to Hallmark, and they made it into a Hallmark movie. So I didn't
Which
even
book is
know
that?
it's called The Note.
The
It
Note.
it was a Hallmark movie in 2007, I think. A Christmas movie. They made it, it wasn't a Christmas book, but they made it a Christmas movie.
Oh, interesting. So I'll have to look that up.
Oh yeah, it's on Amazon, Prime Video.
Yeah, okay. So the Note, we'll have to look it up and watch it. Um, I guess I'll have like maybe two more questions for you because I know we only have 20 minutes with you. I want to ask you if you are willing to share maybe like your personal testimony of how you came to Christ.
Well, I was raised in a Christian home. So I've always I probably was in church the Sunday after I was born. But I remember clearly being in vacation Bible school when I was about 6. And there was a puppet show, and one of the puppets did something wrong and was about to get punished. And then another puppet stepped in and said, I'll take her punishment. And I remember as a kid thinking, oh my goodness, why would they do that? And that's when it all clicked in my head that Jesus came to take the punishment for us. And so as a 6-year-old, that's when it clicked. And I asked Jesus to be my savior, and I've really walked with him ever since. I mean, I'm not a perfect person by any means, but um I pretty much grew up with him, and yeah, and he's always been faithful. I can say
Yeah.
that. Hmm.
I can't say the same for myself. I was raised in a secular home, but I do
Uh,
like hearing stories like that because like my husband, he was raised 100% Christian, raised, same kind of story, but I was raised the complete opposite. So I came to the Lord when I was about 21. That's
uh-huh.
when I came to the Lord. So it's interesting hearing everyone's different walks and how they came to the Lord. Um,
And opposites attract. My husband didn't get saved until he was 25.
oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
In fact, I remember I was engaged when I was like 17, and my parents said, no, you cannot marry him. And so I broke it off. But I remember being in my room and praying, and I said, Lord, I don't know who you want me to marry, but I pray that right now, if he's not a Christian, that you would work in his heart. And that was the year my husband got saved.
Wow. Amen. Look at the Lord.
Yeah,
That's amazing. That's an amazing story.
I know, isn't it cool?
Yeah, that is very cool. Answered prayers.
Mm-hmm. I didn't meet him until years later, but that was, yeah, it worked out.
But the Lord heard your prayer. And you met him when it was time to meet him.
Yes.
That's what me and my husband always say about each other, because I feel like if I would have met him at an earlier time, I probably wouldn't have appreciated him at that time or
Yeah.
vice
Yeah.
versa. Our walks were so different, you know. Like he's always walked with the Lord, but I I started following the Lord when I was around 21, but then I had a moment of I'm not perfect either where I backslid and then I came back to the Lord. So if I would have met him prior, I don't think that I would have really seen the Lord in it at that time
Mm-hmm.
the way I
Mm-hmm.
did, when we got together. So I think it's interesting how the Lord works and his timing is perfect. Ours isn't,
Yeah.
We want to rush everything, but
Yeah.
he has
And
perfect timing.
there's a plan. There's always a plan. And when we can't see what's going on, we have to trust the plan. His,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. Um, do you have any words? I know you said that you have written books to, I guess, help other writers. Do you have any words of encouragement to anyone that would want to write a book, or any advice?
Well, my chief thing is a lot of people think they can write a book because they took English in high school.
Mm,
And no, it's not really that easy because it's a whole different thing. There's professional writing and then there's the writing you do in high school. And so you have to study, you have to learn. In fact, so I put this I teach at a lot of writers conferences, and there's so many things you have to learn that I put together these little writing lessons. And this is like the first 10 lessons in this book, but they're all little, and it's just you just have to learn the craft. A lot of people think it's all about the muse whispering in your ear and you have to, no, it's about learning how to use words properly. And you can learn it, anybody can learn it, but it does take a lot of time. And you have to, a lot of people are in a hurry, and because self-publishing is so easy, they scribble something down and send it off and put it on Amazon, and it's just not ready for prime time. And they don't realize they hurt themselves because if later they were to go to the kind of publisher that pays you instead of you paying, they would look at the sales records of that book you threw up on Amazon, and it would probably sell 100 copies, and they'd think, no, that's not a good track record, so we're not going to take a chance on you. So yeah, you shouldn't be in a hurry because it's going to take time.
And
Remember I
what is
said
that?
I spent 5 years writing all those little things? That's when I was learning.
Yeah. So what is the name of that book that you
Uh,
have there?
Oh, well, this is the first 10 lessons in one. It's called Writing Lessons from the Front. It has a new, prettier cover on it now, but it's on Amazon for anybody who's interested. And I also have a newsletter for writers if you go to angelahunt.substack.com. I just started it a couple of months ago, but it's free monthly, or if you want to pay for a subscription, then it comes out every week. And but it's just little writing lessons for people that they can take and practice during the week and then come back for another one.
That's awesome. That's an awesome thing to do. I'll definitely put that in the group just so that everyone can also sign up for that newsletter. My last question is there anything or is there any book that you're working on right now that maybe we should be on the lookout for? A new
Ah,
project?
well, when
If
I'm
you're willing to
writing,
share.
I'm willing. Usually when I'm writing, they won't be out for a whole nother year.
Okay.
So right now I'm writing, I'm going to do a series on the matriarchs, which is Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. So
Mm.
I've started Sarah, and but she won't be out for probably a year and a half because I still have to write her. But I have a book that releases tomorrow. Oh, this one. The Sisters of Corinth. This is book 2 in a series about, it's called The Emissaries. It's about the Gentile new believers that were in the churches that Paul founded. So,
Wow.
and then I handed in the third and final book a couple of months ago. So, but that was a lot of fun. You know, it's all the ancient Romans and Greeks, and um that was interesting. They were pretty bizarre too. So,
Oh, well, we'll have to keep an eye out for that one. I'll have to look up the book so I can start the first one.
oh yeah, the first one is called, I don't have that one on my list. It's called The Woman from Lydia, about, remember she's in Acts 16, the seller of purple, and Paul had church in her house in Philippi.
Mhm.
So that's the first book. This is the second book, and then I just handed in the third book.
Okay. So
But
I'll
it was,
definitely have to look for it. Yeah,
oh, thank you.
I really enjoyed Esther. So, I mean, I like reading books that have characters in it and that just keep you reading. So, I really enjoyed Esther. So, I will definitely keep looking out for more books of yours, and I'm sure everyone else will too.
All right. And remember, if you read something crazy or gruesome, it really happened, because I do not make it up.
Yeah, I'll have to look at this. So I didn't know that there were sources in the back of the book, so I'll have to look that up too.
Yeah. I don't, if you have a Kindle, I'm not sure they put them in there,
I do
but
have a Kindle. That's how I read it actually.
that's probably in there. But they're always in the back of the print books. I think sometimes with Kindles, see references.
Okay.
But I think sometimes with Kindles, they kind of chop them off. I don't know why, but I've had people say, "Oh, I didn't see that," and I'm like, "Oh, must have read a Kindle."
Yeah.
They do the same thing with
I know
audio.
someone was reading it off an audio book too, so I wonder if they take that out too as
Yeah,
well.
I'm sure they take it out of audio. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, is there anything else that you would like to share with us before we hop off of the call?
Just to say thank you for reading my book, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for coming on and thank you for rescheduling with me. I know it's a little crazy, but thank you for rescheduling and hopping on and answering all of my questions.
Well, it was my pleasure, and you had a very good reason for
Yes.
re
Well, thank you. I hope to maybe one day we can talk again soon. Maybe we can do another book club. And then I can actually have more people on. So thank you.
Thank you, and have a
Yeah.
good night.
Thank you, you too.
Bye.
Bye.